Hey folks, welcome to Unqualified, the fantasy football show that's been We're
not giving that one.
That was good. Just don't say fuck after. We'll just interrupt you.
No, I had it, but then
from the top.
But
we're starting from the top again. No way. This is just going terrible.
No, I just got. I know what I'm saying. I know what I'm saying. I just got tongue tied.
Yeah, we definitely do.
No, he's got it. He's got one more shot.
Hey folks, welcome to Unqualified, the fantasy football show that's been overpromising and underdelivering since 2017. I'm your producer, Rob Diesendorf, joined by my co-hosts Sean Brady and Scott Johnson, two fantasy football rivals that have been sabotaging each other for years. They decided to come together to help you win your league and make your friends look stupid.
Couldn't have said it better myself. I'm Sean Brady. I've been a fantasy football aficionado for 11 years now. Actually, a little bit longer. I've been running a league as a league manager for 10. I've actually been in a league with my co-host Scott Johnson for I think 6 or 7 years. And we are probably the definition of frenemies when it comes to fantasy football. We give each other advice on a weekly basis, even when it's not the fantasy football season. And neither of us have really made it to the promised land, to glory. And I think a big part of that is we've been secretly sabotaging each other
consistently.
Pretty
much every piece of advice, there's always one little thing that's left out. That's like, oh yeah, I'm thinking of picking this guy up, and that's kind of like a paper trail, or like what an octopus does when they shoot out ink, just shooting out blanks at you, so you can pick up the wrong guy, and I can pick up the right guy.
A little smoke screen action.
Yeah, that sounds a lot better.
We're here to help you guys out, and we obviously can't promise you that you're going to win your league, but we can promise you that if you pick up some of the tips and tricks that we'll give you, you're more likely to end up being the kind of fantasy owner that is able to look at their roster halfway through the year and just say, wow, I am so much better at this than my friends. Those guys are idiots.
Or my team is really bad. Wish they didn't take.
That's another option.
Yeah, more likely to happen. We're very unqualified at what we do, but we're here for you.
We're here to consistently give you solid fantasy football advice week over week to help you win your league. We'll also be giving you the latest rumors and news pertaining to fantasy football. Thanks for listening, everyone.
It's getting hot in here.
So a little background on the co-hosts. We've been interstate rivals on fantasy for how long? 6 years now.
6 or 7.
I've consistently beaten you every single year.
Erroneous. That's all I'm going to say about that. It's just you're just unqualified to say that.
I don't know. Seriously though, every year we've been in the same league, like in the same section of the league. We're kind of like the Yankees and Red Sox. We never play each other in the finals. I guess we could, but we're always in the same league. We play each other twice every year.
For some reason, we go to each other for advice and then secretly screw each other over. It's great. It works out great for us.
We actually do. Every time you ask me for advice, I always keep like one piece of information to myself. Like I'm going to pick this guy up, and
I do the same. And I think now we know why neither of us is going to win the league.
Yeah, there you go. Rob, if you play this year, you don't even know what sport we're talking about, but you'll probably win. You just draft Derek Jeter. Anyway, that's a little background on us. I've been playing fantasy since 2008. I remember that distinctly because I actually don't know why, but almost 10 years now. And I've never won our league once. I've gotten to the finals, I think twice, before we kind of shook up our league and you and I were spearheading it. I was with a couple other guys for a couple of years, and I made it to the finals 3 years in a row. I distinctly remember that, and I did not win it once again.
Ooh.
So I don't know how qualified I am, but
here we are. And yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much equally unqualified. I've been actually running a league for going on 11 years now. It's going to be our 11th year, and I've lost in the finals 3 times and still have not won. So, take my advice with a grain of salt or take it as the word of God. It's really up to you.
We'll get into it right now. We'll give you some tips right away. Moving into let's do free agency first. Had a bit of a wild one. A lot of big names, especially running backs that were available on the start of free agency that have found some homes.
I mean, I absolutely love the move that actually happened today, which is Jamal Charles signing with the Denver Broncos for 1 year. I'm saying this. I don't know why I'm going to be so honest with my competitor here, but Jamal Charles to me is just, when healthy, a top 5 NFL running back on a team that likes to run, a team that has not had a good running back in years past. a team that has to run, frankly. And I think at the end of the day, he might wind up in the top 20, maybe the top 10 if everything breaks right.
I disagree with that. The guy's been injury prone for the past 3 years, hasn't he? I think in the last 3 years he's landed on the IR because of a ACL tear in 2 of them. So if he stays healthy, yeah, he's a big talent, but I have trouble believing that he's even in the Broncos with their offensive line, with the competition he has. I don't think he's going to crack the top 50 of running backs. He's going to be a change of pace back. I think he's going to be hurt half the games 50? This year. Not a big move at all. Yeah, top 50.
The top 50? The top 50.
Yeah, you heard it.
Oh, my.
Yeah, you heard that right.
My.
Mark
so
it
Matt
down.
Asiata is going to finish with more points than him?
Yeah, he might actually. He actually
boy.
Might.
Okay. We should keep a tally of this stuff, and then at the end of the year we could take a look.
See who's right and who's wrong, and yeah, that's fine with me. Moving on to another big name that I don't think is a good landing place for him either. It's Adrian Peterson. Obviously, they have Mark Ingram.
Like it at all.
They just drafted a running back pretty high up, 2nd or 3rd round, who's more of a change of pace back. That's like the Reggie. We'll get into that. More of the Reggie Bush type, but Adrian Peterson, clearly a second fiddle to Mark Ingram. I don't think he's going to crack the top 40, let's say, in that offense. Obviously, Sean Payton, they love to throw it, and he's a better pass catcher, or is as good of a pass catcher as Mark Ingram, but I don't think he's gonna do well there either.
I don't think he'll do well, but I do think he'll be better than Mark Ingram. I think they'll be about even, roughly. I don't think it's gonna be Mark Ingram starting over Adrian Peterson. Just based on who Adrian Peterson is he's gonna get the ball. So I still wouldn't buy him. I'm not buying his stock, but I think he'll be better than the top 40 if I had to wager.
Honestly, what I would say is he's one of the better handcuffs to Mark Ingram. I think Mark Ingram's stock goes down a little bit. His draft place goes down to a couple rounds, I would say. But I'd say he's probably one of the best handcuffs out there, but nothing more than that.
Rob, you don't know enough about fantasy to know that Scott's takes are hot right now. He's saying
they're hot.
That two of the best running backs of this generation are going to be outside the top 40 for Peterson and outside the top 50 for Peterson for Charles. No way. No way.
And they're both in their 30s.
They could each play 5 games and wind up in the top 50.
No, my legs have less tear than them, and that's saying something. My legs are better than them. Yeah, hot take. We definitely disagree on the next one too.
I can't
Marshawn
wait.
Lynch.
I can't wait. I'm dying on this hill. That's how it's going to end.
Go for it. Go ahead. Go right ahead.
I'm not going to say anything except for he's going to be a top 10 at fantasy running back this year. He's behind the second best offensive line.
Get out of here with that too.
That's it. He's just better. He's just better than the rest of the running backs. He's behind a better line than the rest of the running backs. If you look at the other running backs in the talent pool, he's going to be in the top 10. It's a fact.
All right. That's your cold take. I'll give you my hot take on this one. Their offensive line is built for Derek Carr. What I mean by that is they're built for pass protection. Not so much, in my opinion, run blocking. So Latavius Murray, not a bad running back in my opinion. Not going to do really well in Minnesota. I don't think. Yeah, of course you think he's terrible. Didn't do much at all. I think he had 850 yards, about 10 touchdowns last year. So run of the mill kind of campaign for him. But he did have the ball. He was like the bell cow pretty much. Besides the two that kind of took carries from him behind him. I just don't think Marshawn Lynch has enough tire on his tracks to warrant a top 10 pick. And I think a lot of people are going to take him in the 2nd round. I wouldn't take him before 5th round, honestly.
Wow. I don't want to get into this too much because I'll start getting heated up. I don't know if we're ready for that this early in the pod, but I will say this because we're going to talk about Latavius Murray in a little while. I think he's actually we're talking about him very soon, but I would say Latavius offers very little outside of just being big and fast, and I think Marshawn Lynch offers everything else. He's not the fastest guy in the world, but he's got excellent after the first contact ability, and he just brings that culture of just unrestrained violence to the Oakland Raiders, and I just think it's going to work out great.
I will say it's a good cultural fit, but I just don't think people. I don't think he has as much as people think he has left in him. But I'll say I'll give him a top 20.
Okay. So we're meeting a little closer on him than the others. Nice.
Yeah.
We're getting
fine.
there.
Yeah.
We're getting there.
Again, I agree with you. Once in a generation type running back for us. Same with Peterson, Jamal Charles. That's why it's so interesting that they are all in different teams now.
Yeah.
But I just don't think he has enough left in him.
Out of the three, I mean, Charles, I think he's good. I think he's in a pretty good situation, but I'm still not. He's too risky for me to really buy in to where he's going to get drafted, fantasy wise. Peterson, same thing, but Lynch, I'm buying partially because I just love him as a player, but also partially because I think he's got more left than Peterson. I don't know. I honestly couldn't tell you what Charles has left, but I think in the situation he's in, I think they could be a top 3 offense in the NFL. So I think why not buy into that?
Yeah. I think he should be drafted the first out of those 3 at least. Those are the big 3, basically, the running backs that, I mean, it's a little different for Lynch because he came out of retirement for the Raiders. But those are the big 3, once free agency started, that we were all talking about. I think he should be drafted the first out of all 3 of these. I think, honestly, Charles is probably in the same situation as Peterson, a very fancy, big-name handcuff that shouldn't be drafted as a RB2 or RB3, maybe a plug-and-play flex play. Same with Peterson. Maybe Peterson will surprise a lot of people and overtake Mark Ingram because Mark Ingram was very shaky in that role last year. And you saw Tim Hightower take a lot of carries from him. But I would agree. Marshawn Lynch for sure should be drafted the first, and he is going to make that offense hum a little bit more and give them that presence and help for Derek Carr. But Charles and Peterson, I think, are fancy handcuffs.
Okay.
Moving on to the guy that Lynch gets replaced by, Eddie Lacy, Seahawks.
Interesting. That's all I'm going to say about this. I don't love it. I really liked what CJ Prosise did at the end of last year before he got hurt. And I think he's going to be involved pretty heavily. I also don't like the fact that Rawls is still there. I don't think Rawls is a great player, but I think he has some ability. And on top of all that, the Seahawks offensive line is awful. It's probably bottom 5 in the league. And I would say Eddie Lacy's not a guy that's going to create his own yardage. So I think it's an interesting spot. I could see it working, but I much more easily can see it not working. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, I think, honestly, what I think happened with the Seahawks were they were looking for a younger version of Marshawn Lynch. So they saw, I mean, Peterson maybe would have been a fit there. Charles probably wasn't a fit, even though they both visited. I think what they saw in Lacy was a younger, maybe poor man version of Marshawn Lynch. I think he'll have moments of brilliance in that offense. But you're right. The offensive line has a ton of struggles. CJ Prosise was very good last year in limited action, but I think he's just a change of pace back. I think Thomas Rawls is more of an insurance policy, but he was shown to be pretty injury prone too. I mean, Eddie Lacy's injury prone as well, but I think, honestly, Lacy, to me, will be drafted right where he should be. What I have a feeling of him being drafted as is like an RB2, and I would take him as an RB2. I think he's probably going to be a strong RB2 all year. Probably not a top 5 guy, but top 20, and I could see that for sure.
I've been fooled one too many times by him, so I'm out on him. The next one, true. This is very interesting because it's kind of a little bit of an intersection of free agency and the draft. So we're talking about Latavius Murray going to the Vikings. Now this all changes a couple days ago when they draft Dalvin Cook in the second round, who I absolutely love. I thought going into the draft he was one of my favorite players. I was really going to be intrigued by where he went, and I could not be more disappointed. That's all I'm going to say.
Really?
I think for both of them that the offensive line again in Minnesota is awful.
Yeah.
So it really caps what these guys can do. I think if Dalvin Cook went to another team like we were talking about, Indianapolis, who again doesn't have a great line, but they have a great quarterback. If he went to New York Giants, who have a great offense outside of the running game, Dalvin Cook would have been, for me, an instant top 20 running back. But here in Minnesota, it's kind of a downer for me. And the same thing with Latavius. Even if you liked Latavius, which I really didn't, now that Dalvin Cook's there, I think it caps both of their values. I think if one of them gets hurt, then you have the backfield to yourself, and it's a pretty nice spot. But as long as they're both healthy, I probably won't own either of these guys.
Yeah, I think it's a committee there, by and large. So which is the worst situation for running back in fantasy. You can't really draft one as your starter. So honestly, if you draft one of them, probably Latavius will go earlier than Dalvin Cook in drafts. If you draft one of them, you pretty much have to handcuff it with another one, and then you'll get maybe RB2 production in total, but at the same time, you don't really want to be in that situation and with your running back. So I'm staying clear of this backfield. I think the interesting thing is the Vikings do have one of the worst offensive lines in pass protection and run protection or run blocking. But I think their run blocking was pretty similar to the Raiders, in my opinion, last year. So Latavius isn't going to do any better than he did last year. I would say tops 800 yards, tops 8 touchdowns. He'll be the touchdown, guy there, not Dalvin Cook. But I think in a year or two, Dalvin Cook will take that backfield over and outperform him. I just think he'll be limited this year.
Yeah, I think in a few years, Dalvin Cook is going to be a great running back. I think it's just not this year. Not excited about it for 1-year draft leagues. All right, let's move on to the next one. This one is interesting because it's not a free agency signing, but it's actually a trade that happened, and it kind of intersected with the draft as well. Brandon Cooks going to the New England Patriots. Yeah, you go ahead.
Love it. This is the first proven deep threat since Randy Moss that Tom Brady has had. They've tried to plug and play random second-round receivers, and it just hasn't panned out. The wide receiver position, besides Edelman, who's not really a deep threat, Cooks is going to open that field up for Tom Brady, who's 40 now, or Garoppolo whenever he takes over, which he probably will in a year or two. I think Tom Brady has one or two more years. Edelman is going to see a boost. I think the tight ends, if Gronk stays healthy, and it goes into our next one, Dwayne Allen will get a boost because the middle of that field is going to be wide open now with Cooks having a probably double coverage, at least one cover corner, and probably a safety covering him at all times in the deep routes.
Yeah, I think I love what the Patriots did, unfortunately, as a Jets fan. They basically drafted Brandon Cooks with their 32 pick, which
pretty much
is just fantastic for them. I think overall it hurts Chris Hogan and helps Edelman. So I think guys that fell in love with Hogan at the end of last year, I wouldn't get my hopes up too high for a full year of production because I think Cooks is going to put up big yardage. I don't see Cooks scoring 8 to 10 touchdowns, but I think yardage-wise, he's going to be pretty consistent for you. And then, to just add on to what you said about Dwayne Allen, I love him as maybe a last round before I take my kickers pick because I think if Gronk gets hurt, he could be a big-time tight end, especially playing with Tom Brady.
Huge value there. Yeah. I think he could be like an Aaron Hernandez or even kind of a younger version of what they had last year, Martellus Bennett. And we saw Martellus Bennett have huge value when Gronk went down. And honestly, Gronk, he's had a ton of injuries every year.
A little rickety.
Yeah, a little rickety there. Too much partying, I guess, in the offseason. But I think that passing offense will still have a lot of value, regardless of who's throwing the ball. I think we do need to talk about Tom Brady and how early he's going to retire. That's a pod for another time. But for now, for next year, Cooks, I think, is going to be a viable deep threat. I think he'll break 1,000 yards, honestly, and a couple of deep touchdowns. Yeah, and I think Edelman, you're right, will have a lot of value. I think Chris Hogan, before the Cooks trade, probably was like a sneaky, cute pick, like late-round pick, but now I think he should be off draft boards.
Yep.
Another non-sexy kind of cute pick that you could think of, Kamar Aiken to the Colts. No one's really talking about it, but I think honestly, the Colts have kind of had their fix with Philip Dorsett. They kind of know what he is. He's not really a every down wide receiver. So besides Dante Moncrief and T.Y. Hilton, who are the clear top 1 and 2, Kamar Aiken could have some value if one of them goes down because Andrew Luck has been known to kind of pass it around. So could be a little unsexy pick there.
Yeah, I will say that as kind of a depth guy, I think he's closer to where Moncrief is than Dorsett is to where Hilton is. So I think he is easily going to be their wide receiver 3. I think he might get on the field with 3 receiver sets. He might even kind of play that big inside guy role that I think has been pretty valuable. You saw Inunwa on the Jets last year have a decent start to the season in that type of role. I would be interested if Aiken could do something like that. I think the Colts overall are going to be pretty good offense this year. So maybe a late round flyer for me, but I'm not too excited about him just because Hilton is unreal.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's funny you mention that because, like, Inunwa for the Jets, they didn't really have a tight end play at all. The Colts just lost Dwayne Allen. So Kamar Aiken could kind of take over that, like, tough slot inside guy like Inunwa did last year. So some value if there's some injuries, like Decker last year for the Colts. If one of these wide receivers on the Jets, if one of these wide receivers on the Colts goes down, could be a sneaky pickup there, maybe a free agent flyer.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get to this next one, which I absolutely love for the Saints. Ted Ginn, instantly, I see you wrote this down here, steps into the Kenny Stills role. For me, all he does is open up the field for Michael Thomas. If Ted Ginn Jr. can have fantasy relevance with Cam Newton as his quarterback, who I don't mind.
Yep.
I can't imagine a healthy Drew Brees with him. I think Ted Ginn with a healthy Drew Brees just opens up the field for everybody, and I think Michael Thomas is going to have a monster year. Minus Cooks plus Ted Ginn Jr., it's just more space.
Michael Thomas is going to be huge this year. Yep.
Absolutely. I think it vaults him into wide receiver 1 discussion. I think he's right on the edge right there.
Michael Thomas or?
Yeah, Michael Thomas, not Ted Ginn. I still would not draft Ted Ginn. I think Ted Ginn, he only functions to open things up for Michael Thomas, which I love.
Yeah.
For Michael Thomas.
I think that's exactly what it'll do. And like with Carolina, Kelvin Benjamin, same situation for Michael Thomas now. He's like kind of the only guy. But yeah, I think it just opens it up for him. Another deep threat change, Deshaun Jackson to Tampa Bay. I think it's going to do the same thing for Michael Thomas in New Orleans as it does for Mike Evans in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, when I look at Tampa Bay, there's two offenses. Something I do from year to year is look at teams that are about to pop offensively. So a couple years ago, we saw the Falcons come out hot, and last year we saw the Falcons really stay hot for the whole year. Mm-hmm. I kind of look at and I say, what team could do that this year? There's two teams that come to mind. One of them, probably the more likely, is Tampa Bay. I love everything about their offense, minus maybe having a more consistent running back, but they have Mike Evans. They now have Deshaun Jackson. They just drafted O.J. Howard, which, name me a more complete deep threat, big guy, great tight end. You can't. They just have everything locked down. And I think they're just one of the most complete offenses, and I would not be surprised if they were a top 5 fantasy offense for all these guys next year. And I think they all help Jameis.
Honestly, I think Tampa Bay, their offense, and this is just speculation, it seems like they're trying to get to the Patriots offense. So 2 tight ends now. They have Cameron Brate and O.J. Howard. They have young, athletic guys that you can't cover with a linebacker or even a safety. You got a good big threat like Mike Evans that Patriots used to have and Randy Moss, and now are kind of getting back to with Brandon Cooks. Good deep threat and a target-heavy guy. Running backs, doesn't really matter who they have. They have Doug Martin if he stays healthy, and then they have Jacquizz Rodgers that they just re-signed, and Charles Sims, who can't really stay healthy but is a good pass catcher out of that backfield. So I think they're trying to get to the Patriots' offensive kind of mindset there. And I think they're definitely gonna pop this year. And Deshaun Jackson is gonna open things up for everyone.
They're gonna be scary good, I think. All right, so moving on to this next guy, Terrell Pryor to Washington. This is very, very interesting to me. When I look at this, the only issue I have with it is his skill set's a little similar to Jordan Reed. I know he does work on the outside when Jordan Reed's on the inside, but he's not a burner. He's just a guy that's just out. He's just more physical than cornerbacks and just kind of beats them up with his size. So there might be a little bit of redundancy there, but again, I think it doesn't hurt Cousins to have, to replace Deshaun Jackson with somebody that's pretty solid. Yeah,
I think he'll step into that Pierre Garçon role pretty nicely. I actually think he'll do better than Pierre Garçon. Garçon reached 1,000 yards last year. Terrell Pryor, I think, honestly, is more of the real deal than people think. Obviously, he was a quarterback at Ohio State, transferred over to wide receiver or kind of a skill player, and he kind of did it all for the Browns last year, which they needed. But I think Washington is in the position that they need someone like that too. They're losing. They lost Pierre Garçon. They lost Deshaun Jackson, who they needed to. They were a little older and past their primes, but they really only have their first-round wide receiver last year who was hurt all year. So I think Terrell Pryor is going to be the number one de facto guy there. Jordan Reed will have a lot more value than he did last year too, if he can stay healthy. But I like this play. I think it's a good test run for Washington, for Kirk Cousins and Terrell Pryor. See if he could stick around.
Yeah, is Pryor wide receiver 2 for you? What do you think?
Yeah, I would say wide receiver 2. Yeah, I would lean more towards wide receiver 3. I wouldn't draft him as one of my starters. I would draft him as more of a flyer, but the ability to be a starter, I would say a wide receiver 3 for me. Probably like anywhere in the range of 80 to 100, somewhere like that.
Sounds good to me. All right, this next one. 2 guys actually going to the same team, Alshon Jeffrey and Torrey Smith going to the Eagles. Go ahead, you started off.
I like it. Honestly, I think the Eagles, as we all know, wide receiver play was pretty bad for them last year. They
awful.
Struggled with drops. Awful. struggled with. Yeah, I was being nice there. Nelson Aguilar couldn't stay on the field. He dropped every single ball thrown at him. The only really bright spot there was Jordan Matthews, who was really the slot guy, and he's still there. But now they have two outside threats that can really open the field up for Zach Ertz, for Jordan Matthews. Torrey Smith, honestly, I don't love Torrey Smith's skill set, but one thing he is fast. So I think he'll open up things in the middle of the field. And also take pressure off of Alshon Jeffrey, who I think is going to resurge back to his top 10 wide receiver ways. I think he'll stay healthy. Had a lot of injury played campaigns in Chicago, but this guy's incredible hands and really physical guy too. So I think he'll vault back into the top 10. I think Carson Wentz is the biggest riser for me after these two moves. I think he'll be top 15 quarterbacks.
Love it. I completely agree. I think he's someone that's still going to get underlooked when drafts come around, and he's someone that I'll draft as my second quarterback if I don't grab a stud. He's going to be my guy that I'm looking on to really kind of step up this year. I don't think they're going to really explode as an offense, but I think they're going to be very, very competent. Kind of like what the Jets were like 2 years ago, where you just see getting good NFL players in place, and you'd be surprised what kind of magic happens when you just get actual players in real spots.
It could pop or not. Like the Jets had obviously they didn't do badly that year, but they didn't stick around the year after, and then they failed kind of. I think it could pop with the Eagles there, with those guys being added in. A draft strategy for Carson Wentz, considering all that, I think honestly what you can do and what I think I will do, draft a quarterback towards the latter top 10 as your starter, and then draft Carson Wentz late because no one's really going to take him. He'll probably do better than a top 10 or like a 9, 10, or 11 quarterback at that point. Kind of like Staff.
Yeah, Stafford was one of the guys I was going to name as still being undervalued. So if you wind up with Stafford and Wentz, you have two guys with top 6 potential and guys that you can get in rounds 9 and 10 or 9 and 12 with Wentz.
My biggest thing with quarterbacks is plugging and playing when you have two guys that are viable. And if you can pick the right matchups every single week, and have an average of 18 to 24 points per week from your quarterback instead of plugging in Andrew Luck for the whole season and dealing with his shitty games, that's right there. You're already winning the quarterback battle. So I think that's a great strategy to do is you load up on running backs and wide receivers and even tight ends in the first 8 rounds. You get 3 viable starters for each of those positions, and then draft a quarterback that's kind of off the radar, maybe like a Kirk Cousins, who will go like 10th overall in quarterbacks, and then take Carson Wentz, take a flyer on Carson Wentz.
Yeah, love the strategy. I would say it's not quite as sexy as being able to look at your roster and say, oh boy, I got Cam Newton here. But if you pick the best games or you pick most of the best games between two lower tier guys, you'll end up with a quarterback that's almost as good, if not better than the Cam Newtons of the world. So I think it's not sexy, but it is effective. So definitely something to keep in mind.
It's all value there. Yeah, I agree. Moving on to a team we were just talking about. This guy didn't even have to move to change teams. Brandon Marshall to the Giants. Not the best move for him personally, but he is like 32 now, 33. Out of his prime, this is like the 5th team in 7 years he's been on. So I don't think this is a good move for him necessarily in his stats, but it is a really good move for the Giants. It's going to take pressure off of Odell. He's going to be a good mentor. Brandon Marshall had some issues in Miami and even Chicago, kind of turned his life around. Odell, you're seeing have some trouble with the big lights in New York, so I think this will be a good benefit to him in that way too, off the field.
Yeah, I will say, as far as Eli is concerned, first off, I'm not a big believer in Eli, especially after last year. But I'd be shocked if he, I'll rephrase that. I wouldn't be shocked if he still doesn't pop off as a really top tier quarterback. But I can see it happening with Brandon Marshall there. Brandon Marshall going to the Giants kind of reminds me of Plaxico Burress going there and just being this monster red zone threat. I think. Yeah. Odell is that explosive guy, and Odell's great in the red zone too. Don't get me wrong. Odell's going to be a top 3 receiver taken for me probably, but still, it doesn't hurt to have a 6'4" monster on the other side of Odell to take some of the safety help away. I think again, maybe not great for Marshall, but it is better than staying on the Jets, so I will give him that.
Definitely is.
I think moving forward, he'll probably be drafted as wide receiver 2, but I'd see him more as a wide receiver 3, kind of like we were talking about with Pryor.
I'd see wide receiver 3 tops. I'm not drafting him as my starter. Odell, he's always going to be a top 3 for me at this point in his career. Brandon Marshall will probably be a 4, but I'm kind of staying away from him. To go to Eli, though, I think this helps Eli tremendously. Has been known to be inconsistent, but let's say you take Eli in round 10, then you take Carson Wentz in round 11. Again, what we just talked about, not a bad plug and play for your quarterback position there, especially with Brandon Marshall with Eli.
All right, so now we're down to 2 tight ends moving around. The first one we kind of mentioned before, Martellus Bennett going to the Packers. To me, all this says to me is if you're going to take a quarterback early, Rodgers is the one to take. I think we're going to see the mega Rodgers that we saw in the playoffs. I think what kind of went under realized at the time during the playoffs was that Rodgers was so good because Jared Cook really came into his own for the Packers in the playoffs. He really opened things up for Rodgers, and Rodgers just had a field day with every defense, including the Atlanta Falcons, even though the Falcons beat them. I think Rodgers is going to have a monster year, by far the QB1, even with Brady playing 16 games. I think Rodgers is head and shoulders the QB1 here. I think I'd be shocked if he didn't end the season as a top 2 fantasy quarterback.
I agree about Rodgers. I disagree about Bennett and even Jared Cook. I think Rodgers is going to do well regardless, and I think it was only 2 games they played in the playoffs where we saw Jared Cook really open things up. And I'm not denying that he definitely opened things up for Rodgers, but I think Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers. He's going to do well regardless. Even with Martellus Bennett, who's, again, past his prime, I think this is the 4th team he's been on or 5th team he's been on in the last 5-6 years. I think he's 31 now. To me, he was a one-hit wonder. So obviously he was really good in New England because he had a system around him. The Packers have never really operated with a good tight end. They've never really had it. Yes, in the playoffs they did, but it was only 2 games. It was a totally different skill set, Jared Cook to Martellus Bennett, whereas Martellus Bennett is more of a physical guy. Jared Cook is more of a quick guy and speed guy. I don't know if it'll be a great fit. I'm not drafting Martellus Bennett at all, to be honest with you. I just don't think it. I think the guys that Rodgers has, Jordan Nelson, Randall Cobb to a lesser extent, Devontae Adams, who I think will have a bigger year this year. That's really what the offense is built around. Running back, they're not going to really have a good running game, but I don't think they're going to build their offense around a tight end enough for me to draft him as a TE1 or 2. I'd rather have O.J. Howard, for example, than Martellus Bennett.
Oh, absolutely. And then kind of in the same vein for me, Jared Cook to the Raiders. He had a couple games in the playoffs,
cool.
But he's older now. He's never really been consistently good ever in his career. So I'm staying away from him as well. And to add on to that, I will say I'm probably going to stay away from Bennett also. I just think he does give Rodgers another option that will only help.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I think Jared Cook is a really unsexy pick too. But I think they really want Clive Walford to come into his own. I don't think they want Jared Cook to be their T8, their tight end 1. I keep on saying T. I don't think they want Jared Cook to be their tight end 1. He'll take some pressure off of Clive Walford in my opinion, and help Derek Carr take that next step. I think Derek Carr will be a top 10 quarterback this year. Now I think we have a word from one of our sponsors. Rob, if you want to take that away.
This episode of Unqualified is sponsored by Inaudible.com. Inaudible.com is an audiobook service with titles that you love every single week. You can get as many as you want from authors like bone-chilling stories such as in some of the world's most renowned authors and writers like and even we even put a sample right in this commercial so you can get a feel for what it's like. Inaudible.com. You're not going to find it anywhere.
That book is one of my favorites.
Great title.
That book I hated.
Really changed my life.
So thanks for that great word from our sponsors. We appreciate our producer Rob pushing product to our our fan base. It's not what we're about too much, but need to pay the bills. Am I right? You got to pay for the computer that doesn't shut down ever. Just kidding. It just shut down. Anyway, let's talk about the Bengals losing two of the main cogs of their offensive line. So it doesn't seem like a important topic at first glance, but what that does to the running game is it makes it suck. So basically, Jeremy Hill, Giovanni Bernard, they didn't do too well last year. I mean, I know Bernard got hurt. Jeremy Hill, not the best running back in my opinion, but he was drafted as like an RB3 last year. This year, he has, first of all, competition in Joe Mixon, who I don't really like too much as a human or a player. But that offensive line is brutal now, and that running game is going to be even worse. I think that team is going to be in the bottom 5 in the NFL next year, and I think it starts with the offensive line.
Yeah, I agree with that. Just for Andrew Whitworth going to the Rams, they lose their left tackle. I think that helps the Rams a little bit. We'll get into that a tiny bit at the end of this segment. And then Zeitler going to the Browns. The Browns could have a sneaky good line and a sneaky good run game this year, but for the Bengals' purposes, yeah, they're gonna suck. And I will say that's not a good thing overall, but I think for AJ Green, that's a great thing. I think AJ Green is going to be a garbage time hero this year. I think he's going to light it up.
Plus, he has on the other end of the on the other side, he has a wide receiver to take pressure off too.
Speedy John Ross.
I think he's fastest guy 4.24 40. I think he ran
4.22,
and that's exactly what Cincy has needed since Marvin Jones left and. Since they haven't had a number 2 guy. So, yeah, I think the passing game will be okay, but I think it's going to be all garbage time, kind of like the Jaguars last year. So, yeah, staying in that division, Danny Woodhead to the Ravens. Sneaky little pick there. Woodhead's kind of injury-prone. He's a smaller guy, but he's a really good change of pace back. Honestly, I think I love this pick for the Ravens. They thrive off of pass-catching backs, but that backfield is very stuffed right now. They still have Terrence West. They have Danny Woodhead now in the mix. They have 2 guys that they drafted in the last 3 years. Additionally, so it's a crowded backfield, but I think Danny Woodhead can carve out a role, kind of like he did with the Chargers this year.
Yeah, I think in that offense he can really kind of be a centerpiece. They don't have too much else going for them. I think again one of my deep sleepers is Rashad Perryman, and
yeah.
I think he could pop. I think Mike Wallace will have some value, but I think Woodhead might be the guy to own in that offense, which makes him on the border of an RB2, I'd say. Maybe a decently safe RB2, especially in a PPR league.
I'd say PPR, he's definitely a flex play. Maybe an RB2. I'd say in regular leagues, he's a plug-and-play flex play. So he'll be a good bye week fill-in. But I think he's a guy you can stash. He's never going to be a all-down back, but I think the other 3 guys are going to take so many carries away from each other that Woodhead will still have his role as a pass catcher out of that backfield.
All right, now we're going to get to a move that you love. I don't get it so much, but I think you love it. Kenny Britt signing with the Browns.
He's going to be the number 1 guy there. I think Tennessee drafted him out of Rutgers like he was going to be the number 1 guy there. He never panned out, bounced around a little bit, and then found a really good role on the Rams last year with 2 different quarterbacks. So if the Browns can manage their QB situation with Cody Kessler, probably he'll start in the beginning. I think Deshaun Kaiser is a little more talented, so he'll eventually take over. Both of those guys will have Kenny Britt as the number 1 wide receiver who just proved himself last year. So he's going to step into that Terrell Pryor role. I think he'll crack 1,000 yards again like he did last year. I think he'll get 6-7 touchdowns. I don't think the Browns are going to be as bad as they were last year or as bad as people think. They'll still have to throw it. Their defense still isn't going to be great, but it's much better now that they drafted a couple of guys. But I think Kenny Britt is the number 1 guy there. I think he'll have a role. I think he'll be fantasy draftable as a wide receiver 3 or 4. Again, a bye week fill-in.
Yeah, I can kind of see it. Kenny Britt is one of those guys that's just always been supremely talented but hasn't put it all together. I think the team he's leaving is interestingly affected here. I kind of noticed that once he left, having Tavon Austin and Robert Woods as your receivers doesn't leave you with much. So I think they needed to go into the draft and grab a top-tier wide receiver. They didn't. They got a later round guy, not a late round guy, but not a first rounder. And they got Cooper Kupp, who I think is a pretty good wide receiver. I think he could have value down the road, but year one, I'm not investing in this pass game at all.
No, I would stay away. I think going to be as bad as the Browns were last year on the flip side. Now in terms of draft reactions, we're going to go by position here. So QB, we all know rookie quarterbacks are not really fantasy relevant in their first year. With a couple of exceptions here and there, Robert Griffin III, Andrew Luck, even them, you're not really drafting any of these guys, but the situations that a lot of them morphed into are noteworthy because of the running game or because of the wide receivers they affect. So to start, the biggest surprise of the draft, I think we can both agree, was Mitch Trubisky, with Chicago trading up to the second spot from the third spot to draft Mitch Trubisky after they just signed
Mike
Glennon for 3 years and gave him starter money. So what I think is going to happen there is they're going to have Trubisky sit, kind of like Aaron Rodgers did with Brett Favre, and maybe push Mike Glennon for the starting job. But I think it's going to be Glennon's job for a year or two. There'll be pressure on him the whole time, but I think it's just a silly move for Chicago, to be honest with you. They're kind of putting their resources in putting their eggs in a lot of different baskets there.
Yeah, I think if this does anything fantasy-wise this year, I think it kind of hurts Jordan Howard. I think it kind of puts a cap on what he can do, which is unfortunate because obviously the offense is going to run through him, but you need some semblance of a passing game to eventually take the cap off, and just open things up for a running back, and it's not going to happen with Trubisky, and I don't see it happening with Glennon either. I think, I guess we'll have to wait and see.
I think Glennon's going to be a game manager, essentially. We'll have to wait and see. I think Kevin White will carve out a role as a wide receiver 1 if he stays healthy, because he's not the guy. No more Alshon Jeffrey, and hopefully he stays healthy. It's been 2 years that he hasn't been. He definitely has the talent. I don't know if Glennon will be good enough to get him the ball deep, which is what I think Kevin White can do, but we'll see how that situation pans out. I think Kevin White will still be a wide receiver 1. I think Jordan Howard will still be a running back 1. But I think until this quarterback situation is figured out, they're going to be capped a little bit in terms of their top 5 eligibility for me. Another quarterback drafted obviously later than Trubisky, Deshaun Kaiser. Honestly, I think Cody Kessler will probably start the year, but Deshaun Kaiser, I think, will eventually take over that quarterback job in Cleveland. And I think he gives Kenny Britt some value once that happens. I think Cody Kessler can't really get it deep. So until Deshaun Kaiser takes over, which I think he will halfway through the year, or maybe a couple games in, Kenny Britt will have value then.
Yeah, I think he's a big guy with a big arm, and he's someone to keep in mind later in the year in fantasy. I'm going to skip over Deshaun Watson for the moment because he's a player that I absolutely love. And I'm going to say one thing about this quarterback class. Mr. Irrelevant from 2017, Chad Kelly, is my mega sleeper for this year. I think I'm not sold on Paxton Lynch. I'm definitely not sold on Trevor Siemian. I think Chad Kelly, even though he was drafted in the 7th round, this guy's got, on a good day, first-round talent. And I think John Elway knows what he has in the 7th-round pick. I think he got an absolute steal. I think he's a guy that, if things break right, can really open up Denver's offense. So he's someone that I'll probably be drafting. If I get a stud quarterback, I'll probably take him very late in the draft also, just to have a flyer on him.
Interesting. All right.
Or he's someone
I
I'll
like
keep
where your
in
head's
mind.
at. Yeah, keep in mind maybe a fill-in if he takes over that starting job.
He'll be on my watch list.
Isn't he Jim Kelly's nephew or something like that?
I think he is. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty funny relation to John Elway there in the front office. Honestly, the only other 2 noteworthy things, and this is longer term, is that Big Ben, that Big Ben and Eli potentially have heirs. So they're both getting up there in age. I think they were both drafted in 2004, if I'm not mistaken, with Phillip Rivers. But they're 36 now. They need to, and Big Ben has shown a proclivity to get a little hurt here and there. Both teams drafted in the later rounds quarterbacks that I think can eventually be groomed and take over those starting jobs. Probably not as well, but I think that's longer term. I think those teams drafted for the future there.
Yeah, I'm not sold on either guy coming out of college, but I think obviously the situation's great to sit and learn from those.
Okay, folks, it's time for our next segment called Hot Takes. That's where I name some of today's fiercely debated topics, and Sean and Scott both give me their hot takes on those topics. You ready, boys? All right, Sean, we're going to start with you, and then we'll move to Scott.
Let's do it.
Ready.
Okay, topic number 1. Supermarket buffets.
Oh, supermarket buffets. Let's say very risky, often disappointing. Things look amazing, but usually don't taste as good as you think they're going to. Stay away from them. That's my advice.
Very, very convenient, very quick, easy. But the tongs that they use are very like germ infested, and they're just disgusting. And I feel like they make them heavier. The food's
You're
heavier
definitely taking a
on
risk.
purpose, so you pay more, which is BS.
Oh, I forgot about that.
You got to
have
weigh your food. That's just another step
Yeah.
in the process, and I feel like it's just you're taking a
yeah,
risk there.
definitely a risk. Might get norovirus.
All right, here we go. Next topic. Professional bowling.
Oh my God, Sundays are for bowling. When Sundays aren't for football, they're for bowling. Watch it on ESPN. Sit there and waste your whole day. It's a great experience.
Wish I could bowl as good as the professional bowlers, but it's entertaining for like 5 minutes, and then I get really bored, and it's like kind of nerdy to watch.
All right, next topic. Sunflower seeds.
Oh, fantastic when they're in the shell. You got all the flavors on the outside. Great stuff. It's just a national pastime. Either, both lacrosse players and baseball players, it's really the one thing that brings them together is a nice pack of sunflower seeds.
I actually hate them in the shell, and I only like them out of the shell, and I'll eat it like once every 5 years. In the shell is the biggest tease ever because it takes so long to get them out. And
I've never actually eaten
I
a
feel like I'm
sunflower
wasting
seed. I
time.
just suck on the seeds. I'm a seed sucker.
That's weird.
I'm just a seed.
That's even
I'm just a
weirder.
seed sucker.
You got a seed sucker over here.
Seed
All right,
sucker.
final topic. Are you guys ready? I'm not ready. Here it is. Having your middle name on Facebook.
Ooh, I don't want to offend a lot of my Facebook friends. What are you doing? No one's interested in your middle name. We already know who you are. What are you trying to be fancy with that? I don't know. It's not for me. I thought about it for half a second in my life, and then I decided not to do it. So just don't do it.
I'm gonna plead the fifth on this one because both my mother and sister have their middle names on Facebook, so I'm gonna decline to say anything about it. But
Smart, man.
if you use it in place of your last name, I think that's kind of smart sometimes because like employers can't really find
It's
you
ambiguous.
then.
Is it a cry for attention, or is it trying to elude a potential boss? I don't know. All right. Well,
I don't know.
thanks for giving us your takes.
You never know. Either one, maybe.
All right, so let's get into probably besides Dalvin Cook, my favorite offensive player from this draft, Deshaun Watson, going to Houston and absolutely
Love
changing
it.
things there. Love it.
Oh, I gotta love it. We're pumped. We were talking. We were video chatting. We were both pumped up when that happens.
DeAndre Hopkins will be unleashed this year. He'll be back to his form from 2 years ago, and he's going to have a great year. It's just that simple.
Top 10, for sure. Lamar Miller, top 10. I think Deshaun Watson has some legs. He'll take some pressure off of Lamar Miller, which Lamar Miller needed desperately last year and never got it.
Yep.
I think that offense, this is like the last key of it. I think this offense is going to be top 5
Ooh, I don't
this
know
year.
about that.
I think they're going to be top 5, honestly. Put it on the board.
I will say they have a great offensive coach. They have one of the probably 3 most talented wide receivers in the NFL, and that's saying a lot. When he's on, he is probably my favorite player to watch in the NFL, DeAndre Hopkins. Top 5 is saying a lot, though, for a rookie quarterback. I will say I do see it working out. I'm not going to say they're going to be top 5, but I definitely think they're going to be a top 15, maybe top 10 offense. And I think Watson's got to start from day one. If they, dick around and say that Tom Savage is going to start, it might slow things down a little bit for this group. But, they should just say, this guy's our guy. He's going to start. We're going to be great.
Yeah, and no better spot for Deshaun Watson to land than with a team that's ready to win now, which Watson has always been on a team like that with Clemson, and Bill O'Brien to groom him. I think Bill O'Brien's one of the best minds. He took the Jets' second round pick from last year at Penn State and did wonders with them. So, but yeah, no better place for Deshaun Watson to land. I think. Let's move on to running back / wide receiver, who I think he probably will have both designations this year. Christian McCaffrey, you're huge on him in Carolina. I'm not as big.
So just for you guys listening, we kind of broke down the draft by position, and this guy, I had to make a whole nother category for him, running back wide receiver. Christian McCaffrey, out of Stanford, going to Carolina. Bless you over there.
Thank you.
He's going to be an absolute star. absolute star, number 8 overall pick. He can play again in the slot. He's probably an elite slot receiver already. He's also not terrible inside the tackles, and he's a great outside the tackles running back. Why I see this working so well is I know that Carolina doesn't want Cam to run the ball a lot, but Cam really functions as their between the tackles goal line running back. I think Jonathan Stewart can also function as a between the tackles back, and Stewart's really limited in the passing game. I think McCaffrey can be on the field for 3 downs for them. I think they will play a lot with McCaffrey and Stewart on the field, especially in big games. And I just see McCaffrey offering so much value as just a dual threat. I think he's another guy that can do a lot of things, but he's not a guy that you call plays for. He just fits into the offense and can do everything for you. To me, he's a top
I think
20-ish running back right away.
Wow. I think Jonathan Stewart is still going to be the guy there. I think this is a much better move for Carolina, the team, than it is for McCaffrey's fantasy value. I think there are a lot more places he could have gone to be more of a quote-unquote bell cow back, which I don't think he ever will be because of his size. I think he's one of the best change of pace backs, maybe more of a Giovanni Bernard type role, where he's catching a lot of passes, but Jeremy Hill is still the guy there. So I think he needs someone to be a bell cow with him, and I think it's a really good pick for Carolina, the team. Fantasy wise, I don't think I'm drafting McCaffrey, to be honest with you. I think I'm still taking Stewart just later at that point. Other running backs that are kind of going to clogged backfields, in my opinion. Joe Mixon to Cincinnati. Not really noteworthy to me. I think it's maybe an upgrade over Jeremy Hill, but there's just too many mouths to feed in that backfield.
I think if anything, I've been frustrated by the Cincinnati backfield in the past. I think if anything, what Mixon getting drafted there does is it slowly starts to break it up. I think this year I wouldn't draft any of the 3, and I think next year one of the 2 will leave. I think we won't see all 3 of them there next year, and I think once Giovanni Bernard and Jeremy Hill could have some value on a different team if they were in a little bit better situation. So I'm keeping my eye on the situation long term, but again, I'm not going to draft any of the 3. Somebody that I will draft in the right spot is Leonard Fournette. I think he's going to a team that desperately needs some semblance of offense. I think what we honestly will see is a little bit of the Todd Gurley first year here. I think long term, he's not going to have a great career unless Jacksonville can figure out, how to piece together a good offense. But this year, I think with a real commitment to running the ball and playing good defense, they're a sneaky good defense as well, which is kind of underrated here as far as Fournette goes. If they can play good defense and just give the ball to Fournette 25 times a game, good things are going to happen. So to me, he's I'm lumping him in close to where McCaffrey is. I think McCaffrey offers a lot more different types of things, but I think Fournette's just a special talent, and I think he's someone I'm pretty high on.
I don't know if he's going to have value right away to me. That backfield last year with Chris Ivory and what's the running back from Alabama they had last year?
Exactly.
Second round pick. Yeah.
TJ Yeldon.
Not even noteworthy. Oh, Yeldon. Yeah. They just bombed. I think that offensive line had a ton of issues. The defense was terrible, so they were playing from behind a lot of times, and they had to throw it a lot in garbage time. So I don't think that's going to change that much. I think the defense will be shored up a little bit, and they made some moves in the offseason and picks that'll help that, and same with the offensive line, but I don't think those changes are enough to really overcome all those woes. Leonard Fournette, I think RB3, but rookie running backs, to me, unless they're landing in the perfect situation and they're kind of under the radar, they're going to get overdrafted. So I'm staying away from Leonard Fournette and McCaffrey and any running back rookie.
That's where I kind of differ. I think I'm willing to take a flyer on a good running back if it's not super early. Like last year, I was reluctant to take Zeke in the first round. There's no way I'm taking Fournette or McCaffrey in rounds 1 or 2. But a little bit later, maybe rounds 5 or 6, that's where I'll start to look at these guys and say, there could be some value here. Somebody that I think later in the draft could be a pretty solid sleeper option is Samaj Perine going to Washington. I think Washington's one of those situations that had Fournette or McCaffrey went there, we'd be saying this is the perfect kind of spot for this guy. I think Washington's
I agree with that.
A nice pro offense that needed a running back, and I think Perine could really step in and be, a solid first and second down back. I don't see him really being a third down option, especially with Chris Thompson being so good over there.
Chris Thompson, I was going to say, yeah.
But later in the draft, he's somebody I'll have my eye on. I think he, by the end of the year, will have some legitimate value.
I think they still have Robert Kelly there, and I think their skill sets are pretty similar. I think Perrine is more of a bruising guy. I don't know how much fantasy relevance he'll have. I think he's going to be like a late bloomer, essentially. So maybe like week 8, halfway through the season, you'll see him taking over that starting job and have some value there. So I think he's like a wait-and-see guy that you can potentially pick up. And other wait-and-see guys that you put on this list is Marlon Mack in Indy, Jeremy McNichols in Tampa, and then Wayne Gallman in New York on the Giants. So all guys, I don't know if you want to speak to them individually, but all guys that I feel like you just need to wait and see if they take over that starting job, they have value.
Yeah, all three of these guys I don't love as players. Obviously they're all kind of 4th round, 5th round guys. But I will say they ended up in the absolute perfect situations. So if they're going to pop, they could be really big. I don't think any of them are going to pop right away. I doubt any of these guys start out of the gate. But if you look at Indy, Tampa, and the Giants, those are 3 offenses that will probably be in the top 10, if not right around it. And I think, if any of these guys kind of take over a starting role or just get lucky with injuries ahead of them, they could have some legitimate value, especially later in the year once, the running back wear and tear really takes a toll.
Wide receivers. I think that the first two wide receivers taken are going to have the most value. So to me, Mike Williams, I think he was taken 7th overall to San Diego. He's going to be the guy there. I think Keenan Allen has just been too injury prone lately. Tyrell Williams, I loved last year, but he was more of a plug-in guy, not a typical number 1 wide receiver. I think Mike Williams is going to take that spot over, move Keenan Allen to the slot where he actually belongs, and then they'll have 2 viable deep threats there. Tennessee, honestly, I think he's going to be the number 1 guy. Everyone's saying that he's going to be doubled up. Their number 5 overall pick, but I still think he's going to have the most value there out of all Tennessee wide receivers.
For me, the way that you feel about rookie running backs, that's how I feel about rookie wide receivers. I know we had a couple years ago that one class that came in and was just kind of blew the doors off and was probably the best wide receiver class right out of the gate in a long time with Odell, Kelvin, Mike Evans, all those guys. But I want to wait and see. I want to see how Mike Williams comes out of the gate. I think right off the bat, if he does offer fantasy value, it's going to be in the red zone. And I think Corey Davis in Tennessee, I think there is kind of a little bit of a vacuum there where somebody can step in and have a good season. But again, for me, it's just a wait and see thing. I can't trust it, especially because, at least in Tennessee, especially because you don't know exactly what you're getting from Mariota. I think.
Oh, I love Mariota this year.
I do like him, but I think I got to wait and see before I start buying into Corey Davis as a number 1 option. For me, if I'm going to draft a wide receiver, it's going to be later, and it's going to be a value pick. Maybe I won't draft a rookie wide receiver this year now that I'm looking at the board. A couple guys that I like Smith-Schuster going to the Steelers. He's, if anything, the 3rd option there. And Cooper Kupp going to the Rams, which I mentioned before. He's a good player, great route runner, would be absolutely fantastic in a better offense, but, he's, again, not going to be a number 1 type option, and you don't know what you're getting from Goff. So, to me, I'm probably staying away from rookie wide receivers this year unless one of them falls into my lap.
I think, to me, I'm only going to take Corey Davis if I can get him in the second to last round before a kicker or defense. Mike Williams, I'm staying away from because it's just too clogged there. So, yeah, I agree. I think rookie wide receivers, you do have to keep him on the free agency pool. Maybe Curtis Samuel will have some value opposite Kelvin Benjamin if they put McCaffrey in the slot there. There'll be 2 rookies on the outside and inside there, but you just don't know. And I think San Diego is too clogged right now, and Tennessee there's a lot of question marks with double teams and Mariota progressing and everything like that. Tight end, though, on the other hand, O.J. Howard, your boy, is going to Tampa Bay. I love that pick.
Tampa Bay is one of the probably 2 or 3 best spots he could have went to, and he's instantly a top 10 tight end for me. I'm trying to think if there's more than 6 guys I'm more excited about than him, and I can't think of them off the top of my head. Obviously you have Gronk, Olsen, Reed, Delaney Walker in Tennessee, and Kelsey. Yeah, and outside of that, there's some guys that are pretty good. But O.J. Howard's got more innate talent than anyone else that I didn't just list. So, I think he's going to be pretty. I think he's going to be pretty good right out of the gate here.
Yeah, I think he's a freak of nature, and I think a lot of people's sleeper for this year, maybe not sleeper because he was actually pretty good last year for Tampa Bay. The other tight end, Cameron Brate, that they had that kind of broke out last year, he has no value now. I think it's O.J. Howard or nothing.
Yeah, I agree. Some of these other tight ends are interesting. I think Evan Ingram going to the Giants. First off, I didn't love it from the Giants draft perspective, and I really, really don't like it for Sterling Shepard. I think them taking Ingram in the first round, all it does is say we're gonna do less 3 wide receiver sets and more 2 wide receiver sets with a tight end, because what he really does is he's not gonna be on the line blocking. He's really gonna operate in the slot, which is where Shepard and honestly Odell do a lot of damage.
Right.
So I think it's them saying we're gonna change our offense a little bit, and I don't love it. I don't love it for the Giants. I don't love it for Sterling Shepard, especially. I actually kind of like it for Odell, though. I think everything's breaking red for Odell right now. He hasn't, he's getting a legitimate opposite side threat in Brandon Marshall. He's got someone that's going to take safeties away from him in Ingram, and no one's really, none of the guys they're adding are guys that are going to get 100 or, 150 targets. I think Odell, right off the bat, is just still in that top tier of wide receiver.
I'll tell you why I do like it for the Giants, because now to me that's a way more complete passing offense, especially with all the limitations they're going to have in the running game with Paul Perkins probably starting, who I like as a sleeper. Now they have Brandon Marshall to take pressure off of Odell. Odell will still get his own. Shepard will go in the slot, but they'll also have Ingram in the middle of the field working that too. So I think Eli now has 4 options. Can get the ball out quicker because the offensive line has been known to kind of be faulty. They don't have to rely on the running game, so I actually like it for the Giants. I think they could have picked him later, but I think it's a more complete offense now, especially in the passing game. I think Eli will do well this year.
Yeah, so that wraps it up for our draft recap here. I think we got a couple more ads from our sponsors.
This episode of Unqualified is sponsored by Amazon Subprime. It'll get there. For people who aren't in a rush, and maybe you don't want to pay $99 a year for who knows what, it's a toot. You might want to get what you ordered, or maybe you want to get surprised because you might not get what you order if you order it from Amazon Subprime, but you will get the best hush puppies east of the Mississippi, spiced by me, Jim. It's just me, Jim, running Amazon Subprime, but I drive everything out myself, so it'll get there. You might be waiting a month, you might be waiting 2, you might be thinking, didn't I pay for like 1 free day, 1 day shipping? But it'll get there. Guaranteed it'll get there. I have orders backed up. I have millions of orders backed up right now that I have not delivered yet, but I guarantee I will deliver it. It'll get there. So sign up for Amazon Subprime. It's about $237 a month, and you also get a free carton of eggs. So Amazon Subprime, it'll get there. The post office lady in my town, she's actually my ex-wife, so she won't ship any of my orders out at the moment until I get that subpoena taken care of, that restraining order, but it'll get there.
That's so great, dude. That was awesome.
Woo. Okay.
Oh, big gulps, huh? All right. Well, see you later.